Thank you. Good morning, welcome to this meeting of the Planning Committee. I'm Councillor Keith Driver, Chair of the Planning Committee, and I'll be chairing the meeting. To begin with the meeting, there are a few matters of housekeeping. In an event of emergency, there are no practice alarms planned for this meeting, so if an alarm sound, please evacuate City Hall by going down the main staircase and out to the War Memorial in front of the City Hall. This meeting is being live streamed to the Council's YouTube pages and will be available after the meeting. Please, when speakers use the microphones at all times, speak directly into the microphone, and with participation, please mute the microphones when not speaking. Well, just go down and introduce who we are, and I'll start on my left, and we'll go round that way.
I'm Councillor Mike Sands.
Councillor Charlie Kane.
Councillor Amanda Fox.
Councillor Carly Harper.
Councillor Emma Hampton.
Councillor Judith Lubbock.
Councillor Jenny Knight.
Councillor Ian Stuteley.
Councillor Chris Smith.
Councillor Sue Sands.
And down this side.
I'm Laura Emerson, Development Management Team Leader.
Tracy Armitage, Senior Planning Officer.
Leonie Bowett, Senior Committee Officer.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you for that. Members of the committee may use electrical devices to access their meeting papers, and visitors are welcome to use their mobile phones and other devices, including cameras. But please use them discreetly and set them to silent, and do not use voice or camera flash functions. We will have a short break at 12 o'clock, and between 1 o'clock and 2 o'clock, if there's any business left to resolve. Thank you. We'll move on to the agenda. The agenda of today, we're going to take application 44 first, Fishers Lane, then Norwich City Football Club and Norwich City Football Club as two together, and then Curtis House, Curtis Road. So move on to item 1, apologies for absence.
We've received apologies from Councillor Laws, and Councillor Sue Sands is acting as his substitute.
Thank you. Declarations of interest, anyone? Yes, Judith.
On the two items about Norwich City Football Club, my husband is a season ticket holder, but I don't believe that would deter me from being
I was going to make a
part.
declaration and say I'm an Everton supporter, so but I've got no bias against Norwich City Football Club. It's not his switch, yeah. Councillor Harper?
Thank you, Chair. Similarly, I'm not a season ticket holder, but I am a regular attendee at Carrow Road. So I don't believe I'm predisposed, or I don't believe I'm predetermined or even predisposed, but I just wanted to declare that.
Yeah. Anyone else? No. Thank you very much for that. Minutes of the last meeting. Do we agree they're correct record for the 12th of November?
Yeah.
Yep. Thank you. And we move on to now the first application, which I said the way we were going to take them is application 44, and it's Fishers Lane, 4 Fishers Lane, and I ask our planner to take us through the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So just start with the site location plan. You can see on the screen that the site is edged red on the plan. The site comprises a vacant 2-storey former warehouse building on Fishers Lane. Building fronts onto Fishers Lane and sides on to a shared yard area, which is shared with a number of properties, including 6A and 6B Fishers Lane. And the frontage here is the kind of premises outriggers that extend to the rear of number 35 St Giles. To the south of the application site is a staircase which provides access to a first floor level here, which functions as amenity space and allows access to adjoining residential properties, particularly residential accommodation above number 37 St Giles, and 2A Fishers Lane, which is also known as Stables Loft or something like that. Let's go on to the next plan. The site is in the city centre conservation area. The site is edged with, annotated with a little cross here, and you can see that it is surrounded to the south in particular by statutory listed buildings that are on St Giles Street and extend along this top section of Fisher's Lane. Just an aerial view here, and you can see that it's a area characterised by dense urban grain, characterised by a mix of residential and city centre uses. Along Fisher's Lane, a couple of buildings, former factory buildings, have been converted to residential use, and they both have kind of a distinctive asymmetrical roof form. Just show you some photographs. This is taken from Fisher's Lane. This is the building in question. This frontage here is 6A Fisher's Lane, and you can see the pedestrian access through to St Giles at that point there. Oh, I'll just quickly go back. So above the application building, you can see the rear elevation of the St Giles Street premises, which are, as I've said, statutory listed. Just a closer picture of the application building, which is scheduled for demolition as part of this scheme. And you can see a gate here that provides access into that shared yard area. Now, standing in that yard area, 6A, 6B, Fisher's Lane, these are the buildings that extend to the rear of St Giles Street properties. And again, this is the application building here. You can see that it's a shared yard. It's used for parking by a number of the adjacent owners who have rights to park in that location. And that's a photograph of the main long elevation of the warehouse building. Okay, so back on Fisher's Lane, just looking north now. Again, this is 6A Fisher's Lane. It was a former factory converted to residential use. This is Shibley Court, again a former commercial building converted to residential use. The staircase that I mentioned running along the southern boundary of the application site, this provides access up to this first floor level, which functions as outdoor amenity space. This is the rear facade of the residential accommodation above number 37, St Giles. If I've turned my back now onto that rear facade looking north towards the application site, along the boundary of the application site at the moment is a fence with trellis above that. The number 2A Fisher's Lane has a small courtyard adjacent to that space that I've just shown you a photograph of. And this is looking kind of over the fence at the rear facade of number 35 St Giles Street. So the proposal involves the demolition of that existing building and the replacement with a new single building comprising 2 dwellings. The scheme has been subject to modification at both pre-application and application stages. So this on this site plan here, you can see a red dashed line that denotes the footprint of the existing building. The proposed building substantially occupies that same footprint, but does extend further towards Fisher's Lane to occupy that kind of space at the moment that is undeveloped. This plan shows those adjacent plots. So to the south, to the north, actually, we have properties at the 6 Fisher's Lane, units 6A and 6B. And then to the south, we have the upper floor of number 37 St Giles Street, and you can just see the kind of plot boundaries of that particular property. This space here is that kind of hard courtyard area I showed you a photograph of. And then over the fence, we have number 35 St Giles Street in terms of that plot width. Let's go turn to the elevations. The scheme as first submitted was substantially 3 stories in scale, and the amended scheme now comprises a kind of 2-story building with a set-in second floor addition. And this creates 2 dwellings, Unit 1, which is a 2-bedroomed dwelling, and Unit 2, which is a 1-bedroom dwelling with a small study. And I'll refer you at this stage to the updates report, which corrected the main report in terms of those dwelling sizes. The design approach has been influenced by a factory typology and includes a materials palette and window styles and an asymmetrical roof form, which are represented in other buildings on Fisher's Lane. The red dashed line that you can, if I can just point out here, this shows the existing outline of the existing building. So it does extend further forward towards Fisher's Lane, and it stands taller than that existing building, with a building which increases in height from Fisher's Lane, stepping up from single to 3 stories for Unit 1. That's the accommodation for Unit 1 is spread over those 3 floors. Unit 1 is accessed directly from Fisher's Lane. And then to the rear is Unit 2, which has accommodation divided over 2 floors, and that is accessed via the shared yard, which we saw photographs of earlier. In terms of the end elevations here, this is the elevation onto Fisher's Lane. You can see the street access front door into that Unit 1. First floor level, there is a small private terrace for that property. And at the other end of the block, you can see the distinct asymmetrical roof form. And this line here kind of denotes the level of the first floor terraced area behind number 37 St Giles Street. So the asymmetrical roof form kind of slopes away from that boundary, with the highest point being kind of offset further into the site. Just to show you some cross sections which show how the accommodation is split. So Unit 1, the one that's accessed from the street, you've got accommodation on the ground, first floor and second floor. And Unit 2, which is accessed from the yard, the accommodation is split over the ground and first floor. And this is the elevation of the development as viewed from the rear of properties on St Giles Street. So you can see from this plan that this is the element, the second floor element, the 3-storey part of the building, which steps up from the adjoining lower 2-storey elements of the single block. This kind of hashed line here denotes the fence and the trellis structure that currently sits along that boundary. So just in terms of floor plans, as I say, that this is the ground floor plan where the main living accommodation is located for both dwellings. The development is car-free, so no car parking proposed. Cycle storage is shown along with bin storage for both properties. At first floor level, this is Unit 1. You can see the terraced area that I described earlier on. Unit 2 doesn't have any access to external amenity space. However, for a city centre site where the priority is to kind of make use of these underutilised brownfield sites, that lack of access to external and amenity space is considered acceptable in this instance. And this top floor plan shows that upper storey in use as a bedroom for Unit 1. And this is the roof plan. And if I can just take the opportunity to kind of again show how that roof plan relates to those buildings, those premises on St Giles Street. That external terraced area of number 37 St Giles is kind of extends between these lines here. So for that width of their plot width, the building is 2-storey in height, and then it steps up to the 3-storey height for that extent of the total building. And that is just an extract from the design and access statement to show a impression of the development from Fisher's Lane. So just going to the assessment, in terms of heritage impact, I have referred in the report the fact that this is it's in the city centre conservation area. There are listed buildings very close to the site. You'll note from the report that the design and conservation team leader considers the scheme not to result in harm to the character and appearance of the conservation area, but that central 3-storey element would intrude on views from Fisher's Lane to the roofscape of the statutory listed buildings on St Giles. His comment acknowledges that the rear aspect is less sensitive. However, he judges the impact to be less than substantial in terms of harm caused to the setting of those listed buildings, and he judges the extent of harm to be at the low end. Given the importance of preserving the setting of listed buildings as set out in section 66 of the Act, and the requirement of the NPPF to attach great weight to an asset's conservation, there has been consideration to whether the height of the development could be reduced by removing the 3rd floor. However, you will note from the report that the applicant has indicated that such a change would make the development unviable. Where there is less than substantial harm to designated assets, the NPPF requires that harm to be weighed against public benefit. That balancing exercise is carried out in paragraph 86 of the report, and in this case, the harm is considered to be outweighed by those public benefits. You will note from the report that the final form of the proposed building has also sought to address that relationship of the development with those neighbouring properties, in particular those to the south on St Giles Street, which abut the site boundary and have windows and amenity space facing the site. But it's considered that the stepping in of that uppermost story will reduce the sense of enclosure and reduce impact to an acceptable level. With that setback, in terms of the views from the terrace of number 37, this section of their plot width would have the two-story element of the block adjacent to their boundary. And in the report, I've set out the relative heights of the 2- and 3-story features relative to that terrace level. In terms of the courtyard to the rear of the stables, the views from that would be more obstructed by the development, but there would still be oblique views from that courtyard area. And the setting in of the top floor into that central location of the black block also reduces the bulk of the development in relation to both 35 St Giles and the properties to the north, 6A and 6B Fisher's Lane. So on that basis, the development is judged to result in some loss of amenity for adjacent residents, but the reduced extent of that upper floor limits the impact to a degree that's considered acceptable. The assessment of the application has been made in the context of Norwich's current lack of a 5-year land supply and the fact that this is a brownfield site in a highly sustainable location where the NPPF requires great weight to be attached to the use of such small sites for new homes. The applicant has secured an agreement to purchase mitigation credits for nutrient neutrality and provided a unilateral undertaking to pay a RAMS contribution. So in conclusion, although heritage and amenity impacts have been identified, these have not been assessed to result in substantial harm, nor are considered sufficiently adverse to significantly and demonstrably outweigh the benefits that the development would deliver. So the recommendation is as set out in the report. I'll refer you to the updates report, which recommends 2 further conditions, which would require the submission and approval of the window and door details for the development and the details of the renewable energy scheme serving the 2 new dwellings. Thank you.
Thank you for that. We have got an objector here, and we've also got the applicant here, by James Knight, to speak to the committee. If you'd like to come up to the table. And you have 3 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, members and officers. My sister and myself are the owners and custodians of 35 St Giles Street, a Grade 2 star listed building, which is currently my home. The property has 12 windows directly overlooking the site. I've no objection to the use of the existing building for residential purposes. It's an unattractive building in poor repair, and I'd welcome its conversion to a dwelling. However, the proposal is to replace a 5-metre tall flat-roofed workshop with a 9.3-metre pitched roof dwelling, which is almost twice as tall, a gross overdevelopment of an already constrained site. Even the eaves level of the 2-storey element is higher than the existing roof line, to which is added a pitched roof, whilst the central part of the building features a 3rd storey and pitched roof. The applicant's heritage assessment simply did not consider the impact of the proposal on the listed buildings on St Giles Street, stating that it was not clear how much of the site is visible from the listed buildings, which is self-evidently untrue. Indeed, the proposed elevation on page 24 fails to acknowledge the existence of the listed buildings at all, giving a misleading impression of the severe impact which the proposal would have on those dwellings. Indeed, part of my home is only 6 metres from the proposed gable wall, and the amenity of those rooms would be materially affected by the loss of light and the very close proximity of the proposed structure, which I think would be oppressive. These issues are confirmed by paragraphs 44 and 45 in your report, which affirm that a concern remains that the height of the development in its three-storey central aspect would have an unnecessary negative impact on the roofscapes of rear elevations of listed buildings fronting onto St Giles Street, thereby negatively impacting their setting. The report goes on to state that this harm could be mitigated through a reduction in height, but the applicant has advised that a two-storey development would not be viable, though no evidence has been cited. It's hard to see how such unnecessary and negative harm to grade 2 and grade 2 star listed buildings could be outweighed by a marginal contribution to the 5-year land supply of 2 additional dwellings based purely on the alleged and unproven non-viability of the loss of 1 bedroom by limiting the height to a more acceptable 2 stories. The report's conclusion clearly identifies harmful impacts and acknowledges conflicts with adopted policies DM2, amenity, DM9, historic environment, but manages to tilt the planning balance in favour of approval simply by characterising the harm to the listed buildings as less than substantial. On the contrary, the massing of the proposal will cause permanent harm to both the setting of the listed buildings and the amenity of their residents. I urge members of the committee to respect both the significant heritage assets in this historic part of our city and the council's own adopted policies and reject this misconceived overdevelopment proposal. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I'd like to invite Bev Hurley to speak on the applicant. And you have 3 minutes as well, Bev, when you get there. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, everybody. I'm very grateful to have the opportunity to speak today as the owner of the building at Fisher's Lane. The views of the residential properties above the St Giles Street shops and the preservation of as much of the view of the Georgian landscape as you walk up Fisher's Lane has been taken into account thoroughly through more than halving of the initial plans that we submitted to the council, which had full second stories like number 6A and 6B across the courtyard. So we now just have 1 bedroom on the upper floor, and this is really the minimum size possible to make development affordable, other than as a house in multiple occupation. We've worked very closely with the planning team. We've had 5 iterations of the design to accommodate the requirements of amenity, heritage, local distinctiveness, character, and other matters, heightened mass. Considerable time, effort and money, now over 40,000, has been spent so far to arrive at the plans you're considering today. And we used one of the UK's most prestigious heritage architects to take this work forward. The footprint of the property doesn't include rights to permanent parking, just addressing some of the objections that were lodged on the portal, which I think might have been in respect of previous designs. As the planning officer says, we have car park, we have bike storage, we don't need additional on-street parking permits. There are no windows overlooking the St Giles property, so no loss of privacy for their occupants. And in particular, there are not 2 windows overlooking the first floor garden, which I would like to point out was constructed and fully attached to the rear of my building without knowledge or consent being asked or given at some point in the last 20 years. The extent of the ground between the rear boundary and the hairdresser business and Fisher's Lane is yet undetermined, but it's meters, as the complainant said. So any noise, any concerns about noise penetration affecting their business in the basement, I would suggest are unfounded. Scaffolding is only going to be erected on the footprint of my building, and of course fire escapes will be kept clear. I have a large store at another property in Mountergate with parking, which will be used as a storage depot for materials on the site. So large delivery lorries, material compounds on the road, and significant storage at Fisher's Lane simply will not materialise, all planned to mitigate the disruption to residents. Finally, I'd just like to make it clear, I'm not some fly-by-night cowboy builder or developer who doesn't care about either the environment or local residents. Indeed, as past chair of the Institute of Economic Development, a CBE and 2 Queen's Awards for services to business and communities, I'm deeply supporting the local environment, heritage and the planning function. I'm also deeply connected to the city through family, friends, and living and running my businesses here for many years. I hate seeing Fisher's Lane as it is now, which is why I've spent so much time and effort on this project and made many compromises in order to achieve the best possible outcome for this tiny site. I hope you consider this proposal represents the best possible outcome and a sensitive and sensible way forward to providing 2 new homes in the city. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll now move on to members' questions to the planning officer. Anyone got a question? Councillor Stutley?
Yes, thank you, Chair. So I was going to ask about the height and the massing, because this site is rather more constrained, I think, than the photos suggested. But actually, you've answered those questions already. So I was going to ask really about the likelihood of archaeological issues arising here, and whether there's any research being done to suggest that there might be something to look at, and whether that would affect viability.
Certainly, the historic environmental services have been consulted. It's obviously the site is located within a historic part of the city, and they are recommending a written scheme of investigation which would need to be undertaken. I don't know any more details than that. I don't know if there's anything in particular that they consider may be found here, but yes, I mean there will be a requirement for an investigation, and that will introduce some additional cost for the developer.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you. We move on now to debate. Anyone got anything to say on this proposal, one way or the other? Councillor Sains first.
Yeah. As Councillor Stutley has already pointed out, the site is very constrained. But when you look at the balance of things, although there is going to be some loss of amenity in terms of view from one of the properties on St Giles Lane or Street, I think on balance the development is going to be an improvement. What we have there now is essentially an abandoned site which no longer serves the purpose for which it was originally built. So although I sympathise with the objector tremendously, I think once this is done and dusted and redeveloped, I think it will be an asset to the area. So I will be voting in favour.
Councillor Stutley.
Thank you. I somewhat disagree, actually. I think this is. I think this certainly needs some development, and perhaps a single dwelling here would be the most appropriate use of the site. I think it is overdeveloped. I think the objector made some very compelling arguments against it, and also the report that suggests that there are heritage asset issues have convinced me on a finely balanced issue, and I'll be voting against. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Lovick.
Thank you. Yeah, I think that last photograph tells it all, really, that it is such a dilapidated building. It's got no architectural merit as it stands, and the removal of that building, I think, would greatly benefit the area, bring 2 properties back, bring 2 properties into the housing market, bring viability back to the some vibrancy back to that area where more people living there, and I think we've heard from the applicant that they've worked hard with our officers, you know, spending money and resources, making it as agreeable as possible, and considering it's surrounded by so many properties, I think, you know, the best has been achieved. The best that possibly can has been achieved. So for that, for those reasons, I shall be voting in favour. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Hampton. Thank you, Councillor Fox.
Yeah, I think an area being run down and dilapidated isn't a good reason to vote through a plan and application, just because otherwise any potential developer could just allow a piece of land to become run down and in order to get plans through. That is kind of how it works, and I don't believe that is how it should work. And I think that the loss of amenity, you know, can be seen as, oh, you know, on balance, it's okay. But, you know, if you're the person living in that dwelling, then that's a permanent loss of amenity. You know, it has been noted that there is harm in these documents. And also, you know, that there is harm to both the historic value and the amenity, so I'll be voting against.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Harbour.
Thank you, Chair. I very much agree with what Councillors Lubbock and Hampton have said. I think, I mean, I've got enormous sympathy with the objector, but I think you know, when it comes to planning, we can only consider the application before us. We don't have an opportunity to, you know, do some blue sky thinking and think about what we might want the site to be used for. We are you know, legally required to consider the application before us and its merits. I don't believe that there are sufficient grounds to turn this application down, so I'll be voting in favour.
Councillor Sands.
Yeah, that last photo was quite compelling when you looked at it. I mean, I'm not sure what else you would use that area for other than development. And obviously, I gather that, that the objector today didn't object to housing being there. But it looks to me and sounds to me like a lot of effort and work's gone into thinking about redesigning and taking into consideration different aspects. I am interested in the archaeological aspect that Councillor Stootley raised, which I think would be very interesting. But when you drive around Norwich and you see these pockets of areas that have nothing going on, this clearly will have something positive going on. So I'll be voting for it.
Councillor Norwich.
Yeah, I am very much reassured by the steps that have been taken to ensure that archaeologically and it fits in more with the surrounding buildings. I do sympathise with the loss of amenity, but I will be voting in favour.
Okay, I had no proposals. Ian, you want to come back?
Yes, thank you. I think clearly this site needs to be developed, or will benefit from being developed, but it could have been a single dwelling, and I think some additional weight's been given to it because it's two, and provides a marginal benefit to the targets for building. I think it could be it looks substantial enough, so it could be a very viable 3-bedroom single dwelling, you know, if you're replacing a dilapidated building, what needs to go in there, it has to be right because it's permanent. and I think this is just a little bit too big.
Okay, thank you. I had no proposal, so I'm going to move the recommendation, which is to approve. And can I have a second for that? Thank you. Anyone wish to speak on the proposal? Now we'll move to the vote, and all those in favour, please show. We will take a
Yeah, so that's a recorded vote. So voting in favour are councillors Driver, Mike Sands, Councillor Kane, Councillor Harper, Councillor Hampton, Councillor Lubbock, Councillor Knight, Councillor Smith, Councillor Sue Sands.
And those against?
And voting against are councillors Fox and Councillor Stookley.
Thank you. That's everyone. That's been passed. Thank you. We move on to the second item now, which is the football ground or outside the football ground. And we got someone outside we need to get in. Anyone want 5 minute break quickly?
Yeah, very 50s or 60s, don't they?
Yeah, they're not like touch with us, though. Sure, who shall it? Thank you for that. Move on to our next application and the last one. This is Curtis House, Curtis Road, and I'll ask Samuel to take us through the report. Thank you.
Good morning. Thank you. Turn it off again. Sorry. I've just asked Lara to move. So what we're going to go through on the screen are just the plans. I have photos in the slides if anyone wanted to see any photos, but as everything was taking quite a long while, we can refer back to those so we don't have a long while running through those. So they are available upon request. So this application is for proposed for 7 residential dwellings on Curtis Road, which is in the Catton Grove ward of the city. So the site layout is so it's on the corner of Curtis Road. Curtis Road is a sort of T-shaped road. At the north is Mile Cross Lane, where we have Screwfix and Helston Leather and Cloth Furniture shop. You may be familiar with the junction. Come down Curtis Road, there's industrial commercial uses to the east, and to the west there are, following the initial commercial uses, Screwfix, etc., there's residential to the west. On the fork of Curtis Road to the west, that is where the residential area of the road is. Follow that through to the west, and that comes to Kerrison Toys car park and access to the Aylsham Road local centre. If you follow it further to the south, it becomes an unadopted road called Keelan Close, and then the landscape changes in topography, and we have Mason Road at a lower level beyond, and we've got Baxter Court, which is accessible from Aylsham Road to the south, so below the final plots of those. So this is all at the higher level. Mason Road is to the southeast, separated from this site. The site was previously occupied by World of Beds. In 2021, an outline plan application was submitted and it was approved by committee for redevelopment of the site for 7 homes along a similar, though not exactly the same, layout as this. In 2022, an application, just double check that date, sorry. 2023, an application for the demolition of Curtis Beds was submitted and approved. So the site is currently cleared, ready for development. The current application is a new application, which is a full detailed application rather than an outline application. So similar layout to before, 7 properties, 2 on the north facing Curtis Road, 2 facing to the east to the lower end of Curtis Road, and then 1 on the finger of land at the southwest. So we've got 3 pairs of semi-detached houses in the main bulk of the site and 1 detached house in the southwest corner. All properties are 3-bedroom houses. They all have 2 car parking spaces. They've all got bin, bike storage, private gardens, turning areas for deliveries, vans, vehicles in those. We're at committee today due to objections. So objections raised or concerns raised related to impact of the commercial areas onto the residential dwellings. So the applicant has done a thorough noise impact assessment, which has been assessed by our environmental protection officers. As such, the site layout has slightly been amended and boundary treatments changed. So to the south, if we look at the drawing on the screen at the moment, at the south bottom right of the drawing, there's a commercial building there. So all of that boundary, which is between the residential dwellings and the commercial building, is a 2.2 high brick wall for acoustic purposes. The boundary which runs between plots 3 and 4 and the parking areas to the south of that is acoustic fence at 2.2 meters high. On the right-hand side of the site of plot 4, we have a garage which has been located to also provide acoustic screening. The house is also to be designed with appropriate windows for acoustic screening and mechanical ventilation, so they're able to get fresh air within the properties without having to open the windows on hot days if there's noise by adjacent commercial uses. Some concern was raised by neighbouring residents regarding overlooking and overshadowing. The layout of the site has been updated and amended. The dwelling, plot 7 at the bottom left of the drawing, is a 1.5 story property. So it has a steep pitched roof, which has been designed in order to allow, as this from the south, more light to pass over. The BRE 25-degree test has been checked to ensure that the properties don't cause overshadowing to the existing residences and also to the residences within the site. All daylight levels are considered acceptable. We have issues relating to transport. So there's concerns about the current quality and state of the road, but they relate to the current quality and state of the road and are not impacted by the proposed development. And as the highways officer has advised, a commercial use at this place is not likely to have any less impact on the road than 7 residential dwellings. They're interchangeable sort of amounts of comings and goings that would be expected. The site has been designed with soft landscaping to provide a good street scene, give it the residential aesthetic, but also to assist with biodiversity improvements on the site and to help with sustainable drainage impacts. The entrance on the lower tier on the right hand side of Curtis Road is designed as such to minimise the conflict with commercial uses of adjacent sites on the right hand side of the road and also that unit to the south. All vehicles that would enter into here have turning spaces that can be seen in the 2 sort of hatched out areas, so they can enter the site, turn within the site and exit in the forward gear, so that there's no reversing out into the locations where other traffic or commercial traffic could be. It should be noted that the Curtis Road to the south, as it goes down to the right, doesn't go anywhere. It's a dead end. It goes to a close, but it doesn't go beyond. So there's no through traffic, and it's a 20 mile an hour road. I think I've covered all of the reasons for objection in there, but if there's any that come up, I'm happy to cover those in questions. As the councillors are probably aware, Norwich City Council doesn't currently have the ability to demonstrate a 5-year land supply for housing, so this would help contribute to that. We'll get this, so the wording relating to the housing land supply, I will just quote, if I can find the right paragraph. And this, here we go. Yeah, so Norwich City Council is currently unable to demonstrate a 5-year housing land supply as required by National Planning Policy Framework. This engages the presumption in favour of sustainable development as outlined in paragraph 11D of the NPPF. In such circumstances, planning permission should be granted without delay unless the application of policies in the NPPF provides clear reason for refusal. In the assessment of this case, there are no overriding constraints or significant adverse impacts that would demonstrably outweigh the benefits of providing the additional housing in this location. That's paragraph 64 of the report. This application has been on hold since 2023 when it was submitted because of nutrient neutrality mitigation impacts. The applicant for this site, although a minor site, worked very hard whilst there were no credits available to try to seek on-site mitigation through unique methods. They sought specific advice from Natural England. Unfortunately, due to the size and constraints of the site, they were unable to find a solution. Now that credits are available, they have secured credits, which, subject to approval of this application, they would then purchase prior to this decision being formalised. This constitutes a sustainable use of a brownfield site in the city where the principle of residential development at this density has already been accepted. So the recommendation is for approval, subject to conditions at the end of this report and subject to obtaining nutrient neutrality mitigation credits. Thank you.
Thank you, Samuel. Any questions? I've got one. We keep using this 5-year plan and we need the houses and stuff like that. How many we got to build before we don't use that every single time? So every single plan what come here is don't forget we're short houses and we ain't got the plan. How many we got to build before we can get rid of that bit in here?
So I don't know a number of how many short we are, but we have currently got a 4.6, something like 4.6 year
put in there to
housing.
pressurize the members to.
Well, it's in national policy. It's a requirement, and we have to check our land supply every year to check whether we now have a 5-year land supply. That could change in future, and if it does, then we'll inform members. But at the present time, when we're making the decision, that's a consideration that has to be taken into account for any housing development.
Could I add to that as well that it's land supply, so this is consents and allocations. When sites are built out, that constitutes delivery, which is a separate thing to the 5-year land supply. So this is having enough land for residential use to fulfil the requirement set by central government.
Thank you, Councillor Knight.
Yeah, so I just want a bit of clarity on, so in 32.2, it talks about use of shingle for 2 turning areas. And then later on in 116, it says that it was initially specified as gravel and then becomes revised to be resin-bound gravel. Which is there shingle in part of the turning circles, or is it all resin-bound gravel now?
So the paragraph 32 was the consultation response from the highways officer who raised concern about the use of shingle. So it has now been revised to be resin-bound gravel to enable bicycles to cycle over it and so that the shingle doesn't spread out onto the road. So resin-bound gravel. So that was the 32.2 was the concern raised. The applicant has responded by changing specification.
Okay, thank you. No one else got any? Oh, Councillor Stootley.
Just quickly, I noted that Natural England had concerns about this. Just to confirm, are they fully satisfied?
That's because the credits have not been purchased. So until credits have been purchased, they will have a holding objection. So the credits will mitigate the need. So that their concern is on the basis they won't say it's acceptable until credits have been purchased. So
thank you.
To add to that, what we do at the City Council is we don't require applicants to purchase their credits before committee because there is a risk that committee overturns our recommendation, and then that would leave them in a tricky spot in terms of having purchased credits that they don't need. So what we do instead is we consult Natural England, we expect that response from them, and then we ensure that those credits are purchased before we issue a decision.
Okay, that's interesting. Thank you. So essentially, they will purchase those credits before they start building. Yeah, thank you.
Councillor Knight again.
Sorry, I recognise that I'm just talking about gravel, but I just want to clarify. So it essentially the use of this resin-bound gravel solves the solution. solves the solution, solves the problem of the drainage issue and also the accessibility for bikes and wheelchair users. Yes.
That's correct. Yeah. So the resin bound gravel, there will be drainage on site. There'll be sustainable urban drainage within it. There's drainage gullies at the exit to the site to ensure that water doesn't dispose onto the highway. The soft landscaping will be designed in order to take some of the surface water drainage as well. So yeah, it does resolve those issues.
Thank you.
Okay,
Sounds
thank
like a good balance.
Okay, thank you. We'll move on to the discussion now. Anyone else want to talk about the whole lot? Councillor Sands, Mike?
I think a lot of us here will recognise the design of these places. Very sort of late 40s, 50s, 60s sorts of designs, but of course I have no doubt that they will have all sorts of modern amenity levels of insulation in there. So it's nice to see an architectural reflection, shall we say, and I dare say this has been done to sort of match that part of the city. So although I understand the objections that some people in the area will have, I think these places will be an asset to the local area and to the city. So I will be voting in favour.
Thank you, Councillor Stutley.
Yes, thank you. Again, I have sympathies with members of the public that object to this, but it does seem like a suitable development opportunity. As always, it's a shame that these properties are not going to come with more green credentials, but until that's a requirement, we can't object. So I'm going to vote in favour. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sue Sands.
I mean, to my eye, it looks like a lot of buildings in that small area. Is this all within, you know, what's allowed to put in there? I mean, it seems to be.
They did ask for more.
They asked for more. Oh, okay. It just seems to me to be quite a lot shoved in there when the other, you know, the older houses will have nice big gardens and green areas and so forth.
Dan, do a campaign on that.
Yep, so the density is the same density as the already or previously approved outline consent on this site for 7 dwellings. The density is approximately sort of 45, 47 dwellings per hectare. The Greater Norwich local plan, which was adopted in 2024, requires in the Norwich City Council area that a density of a minimum of 40 dwellings per hectare, where appropriate, should be sought. So it's in accordance with policy expectations and sustainable use of brownfield sites.
You know, so what sort of outside area are available to each house then, or each dwelling?
They're all marked off, aren't they?
All dwellings have private rear gardens.
What sort of size are we talking in the rear gardens? Let's get specific now.
I don't have the measurements to hand, but it's as per the ones on the screen here, comparable. You can see the size of a car comparable to the size of the gardens. Might be a help.
So these are family homes, aren't they?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, Councillor Fox.
Yeah, I also wish that they kind of came with better eco credentials, but until planning laws changed, you know, we have to act within that law. My concerns with the development were around the drainage, and I feel like, you know, my concerns have been satisfied by the the drains beside the road, and also some of the landscaping. Until planning law kind of catches up with our wishes, and we've got to kind of vote within that.
Okay, thank you. We'll now move on to discussion of the whole thing. Anyone want to say anything? Councillor Knight? Yeah, fine.
Yeah, so it looks like only plot 4 has bike storage. Is that correct?
Is that working? all plots have bicycle storage. So plot 7 is in the top left of its garden. It's a sort of dotted area.
Oh yeah, I can see that.
Plot 6 is at the rear of its garden again, adjacent to 2 bins.
Oh, lovely. So it's all in the gardens.
Yeah, so plot 5, it's all at the ends of each garden. So each, oh, sorry, my hair's gone. Each
Okay.
plot has bike storage and bin storage available. So
We move on to discussion, anyone? Okay, the recommendation is to approve. I'll move that. Could I have a second report? Thank you. Any more discussion, anyone? Now we'll move to the bulletin. All those in favour, please show. That's unanimous. Thank you. First one today. Thank you. That's the end of the planning committee. Thank you very much for coming, and we'll see you later.